The first thing Zaria Cole felt was warmth, not the kind that comes from blankets or heated rooms. This was something different, something alive, a slow, steady rhythm rising and falling beneath her cheek. A heartbeat, strong, calm, consistent. Her eyes were still closed when the banging started. 3 loud pounds against a door somewhere above her consciousness. Then 3 more. Then a voice, sharp and authoritative, cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. "Mr. Lee, sir. We need to speak with you immediately." Zaria's eyes flew open. The ceiling above her was not hers. That was the first thing she registered. It was too high, too white, framed in soft golden light that came from somewhere elegant and expensive. A chandelier, a real one, the kind that cost more than her rent for a year. The second thing she registered was the chest beneath her cheek, bare, warm. Rising and falling with the calm breathing of someone who was very much awake and very much aware of her presence. She turned her head slowly, the way you do when your brain is begging you not to confirm what your body already knows, and there he was, a man. Lean, sharp-jawed, dark hair slightly tousled against a pillow that probably cost more than her entire suitcase. His eyes were open, dark brown, almost black, watching her with an expression she could not read, not angry, not confused, just watching. The banging on the door intensified. "Sir, our security cameras flagged an unauthorized individual in the penthouse. We need to verify your safety immediately." Zaria's mouth fell open. No sound came out. The man, the stranger whose chest she had apparently been sleeping on, slowly sat up. He reached for his phone on the nightstand with one hand, completely unbothered, the way a man moves when he owns every room he has ever walked into. Another guard's voice. "Should we remove her immediately?" Zaria finally found her voice. It came out as a whisper. I didn't, but the man held up one finger, not at her, at the door. Then he said, calm as still water, "Nobody touches her." Silence fell on the other side of the door so fast it felt like the whole building stopped breathing. Zaria stared at him. He turned and looked at her. And for exactly 3 seconds, neither of them said a word. Then he simply said, "You look like you need coffee." Cut to black, because 12 hours earlier, Zaria Cole's life had already been falling apart at every seam, and she had no idea that a wrong room would be the beginning of the only right thing that had happened to her in years 12 hours earlier. The conference hall of the Grand Celestia Hotel in Seoul buzzed with the kind of energy that made Zaria feel like she had walked onto the wrong planet. She stood near the entrance with her rolling suitcase, her laptop bag cutting into her shoulder, her blazer slightly wrinkled from 14 hours of travel, and she told herself what she had been telling herself for the past 3 weeks. You belong here. You worked for this. You belong here. The lobby of the Grand Celestia was not a normal lobby. It was an experience. Marble floors so polished she could see her own reflection looking up at her, exhausted, wide-eyed, clutching her conference registration printout like it was a life raft. Chandeliers the size of small cars dripped crystal light from ceilings 4 stories above her head. Men in tailored suits moved past her speaking quietly into earpieces. Women in gowns that cost more than her student loans glided across the floor like they had been born walking on marble. And then there was Zaria. 29 years old, natural hair tucked into a protective style because she had not had time to do anything else before the flight. Her blazer was from a thrift store she had carefully tailored herself because she was good with her hands and bad with money, or at least, she had been bad at trusting someone else with it. That thought twisted in her chest and she pushed it down. Marcus. She was not thinking about Marcus today. She was here for the Global Emerging Entrepreneurs Summit. 3 days of panels, networking and pitch opportunities that could change everything for her small sustainable fashion brand, Cole Plus Thread. She had saved for 8 months to afford this trip. 8 months of skipped lunches and freelance alterations and selling custom pieces on weekends. 8 months, and then 2 weeks ago she had checked their joint account and found it nearly drained, nearly $4,000. Gone. Marcus had told her it was an investment opportunity. Something big. Something that would double the money before her trip. She had been uneasy, but she had trusted him because that is what you do when you love someone and they tell you to trust them. She had trusted him, and he had taken her money and spent it, she later found out, on a weekend trip he took with her cousin Bianca. Her cousin, Bianca, who had held her while she cried about Marcus pulling away. Bianca, who had told her she was imagining things. Bianca, who had sat across from her at Sunday dinner 3 weeks ago and looked her directly in the eye and said, "Girl, you need to stop being so paranoid. Marcus loves you." Zaria's jaw tightened at the memory. She had made it to Seoul on emergency credit, 2 sponsored ticket upgrades, and sheer fury disguised as determination. She was here. She was going to make this work. She was going to walk into that summit, pitch her brand, secure a distribution connection, and fly home with something to show for every single sacrifice she had made. She was not going to cry in a fancy hotel lobby. She repeated that to herself firmly as she approached the check-in desk. The receptionist smiled at her, perfectly polished, and tapped at her computer screen. Welcome to the Grand Celestia. Name please, Zaria Cole. I have a reservation, standard suite, 4th floor. More tapping, a slight pause, a small frown that the receptionist immediately smoothed away. Ms. Cole, I do see your reservation. Another pause. There appears to have been a system update this afternoon that affected several room assignments. I do apologize, it seems your key card has been. I'll need to reissue it. Zaria exhaled slowly. Okay, that's fine, can you just, of course, one moment. What followed was 20 minutes of polite confusion. 3 different staff members, 2 apologies, and 1 key card that was eventually placed in her hand with a smile and the words, "You're all set, Ms. Cole, penthouse level. Enjoy your stay." Zaria had been so tired, so wrung out from travel and grief and barely controlled anger that she had not questioned it. Penthouse. She had assumed it was a complimentary upgrade for the inconvenience. She had assumed wrong. The elevator to the penthouse level required a special key card tap. Zaria noticed that. Somewhere in the foggy back of her exhausted mind, she noticed it and filed it under fancy hotel things and kept moving. The elevator doors opened to a private hallway, just one door at the end of a corridor lined with soft wall lighting, and a carpet so thick her heels sank into it with every step. She should have questioned it. She didn't. She tapped the card. The door clicked open. She stepped inside, dragged her suitcase through the entrance, and stopped walking. The suite was not a room. It was a world, floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 walls, offering a panoramic view of Seoul at night that looked less like a city and more like someone had scattered diamonds across black velvet and called it a skyline. The living area alone was larger than Zaria's entire apartment back home. A curved sectional sofa in cream leather. A bar cart stocked with bottles she couldn't name. Fresh flowers, white peonies, arranged in a vase on the dining table like someone had placed them there just hours ago. She stood in the entrance for a long moment, then her shoulders dropped. Then her laptop bag slid off her arm onto the floor. Then she sat down on the edge of that cream leather sofa, pressed her palms flat against her thighs and just breathed. Because the truth was, and she would not say this out loud to anyone, not even herself in the daylight, she was so tired she could cry. Not about the room, not about Seoul, about all of it. About Marcus standing in their kitchen 3 days before her flight, finally admitting everything with the casual cruelty of someone who had already made peace with hurting her. About the way Bianca had not even called. Not once, not a text, not a sorry, nothing. About 8 months of sacrifice that had felt for a moment like they might mean something, and then the account balance appearing on her phone screen like a slap. She pressed her fingers to her eyes. Stop it, she told herself. You're here, you made it, that's enough for tonight. She stood up. She found the bathroom, marble enormous, with a rainfall shower that she stood under for longer than was probably reasonable. She let the hot water work through the knot in her shoulders, the tension in her neck, the particular kind of tired that lives in the body after grief tries to disguise itself as anger for too long. She changed into her sleep shirt. She pulled back the duvet on the bed, and the bed was a masterpiece, a king-sized, cloud-like, sinfully comfortable thing. And she climbed in. She was unconscious in under 4 minutes. She did not hear the penthouse door open 40 minutes later. She did not hear the quiet movement through the suite, the low murmur of a phone call ending, the sound of a jacket being placed over the back of a chair. She did not hear the pause in footsteps. She did not hear the voice, low, slightly disbelieving, that said quietly in Korean, "What in the world?" Lee Hyun-woo had been awake for 31 hours. This was not unusual for him. Sleep had never come easily, not since he was 17 years old and the company started being handed to him in pieces while he was still figuring out who he was as a person. By 20 he had learned to function on 4 hours. By 25 he had stopped expecting more. Now at 33, his body ran on discipline and caffeine, and the particular focus of a man who had decided a long time ago that feelings were less productive than results. He had flown into Seoul from a board meeting in Singapore, bypassed his family home, bypassed his mother's 3rd phone call about the engagement dinner she was planning without his full agreement, and checked into the Grand Celestia because it was quiet, and because nobody here looked at him like he owed them something. He had been on a final call with his CFO when he stepped into his penthouse, and found a woman in his bed. He stood in the doorway of the bedroom for a full 10 seconds. She was completely, deeply, genuinely asleep. Curled on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek, her natural hair haloed softly against his pillow. Her breathing was slow and even. Her face, in sleep, had let go of whatever it carried when she was awake. He could somehow tell there was something it carried. The slight furrow between her brows, not quite smoothed away even in sleep. Like whatever was hurting her had followed her all the way into unconsciousness and refused to let go entirely. He should have called the front desk immediately. He stood there instead. His CFO's voice continued in his earpiece, something about quarterly projections, and Hyunwoo reached up and removed the earpiece and set it quietly on the dresser. He looked at the woman in his bed for another long moment. What was going on in his head right then? Even he probably could not have answered that clearly. He was a man who had learned to make decisions in seconds, to read a room, to calculate outcomes before anyone else had finished asking the question. But standing in the doorway of his bedroom at 1 a.m, looking at a sleeping stranger who had somehow ended up in his space, he felt something he hadn't expected. He felt nothing urgent. For a man whose mind never stopped, that was remarkable. He changed quietly in the ensuite. He came back, he considered the sofa. He looked at the king-sized bed. It was objectively enormous, the kind of bed you could share with someone and never once make contact if you chose not to. He had bought this specific suite partially because of that bed. He told himself he would call the front desk in the morning and sort the administrative confusion out then. He told himself it was simply the most logical decision given the hour. He lay down on the far edge of the bed, as distant from her as the mattress would allow, and stared at the ceiling. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, within 20 minutes, he was asleep. He was not awake, therefore, when Zarya shifted in the night the way people do when something warm and solid exists within reaching distance and the body, in its honest animal wisdom, simply moves toward it. She didn't wake up when she moved, she just found him. Her cheek settled against his chest, her breathing deepened further. Her fingers, loosely curled, rested against his side, and then so quietly he almost didn't hear it, a whisper, not quite words, but shaped like them. "Don't leave me too." Hyunwoo had been drifting toward sleep when she said it. His eyes opened. He stared at the ceiling. He felt the small weight of her against his chest, so different from the practiced, deliberate touch of the people in his life who wanted things from him. This was the touch of someone who wasn't performing anything. She didn't even know he was there, and somehow that made it the most honest thing anyone had done near him in years. He did not move her. He told himself it was because waking her would create a scene at this hour. He told himself it was the practical choice. But the truth, and it would be a long time before he admitted this to himself, was that the warmth of another person, completely unguarded and completely unaware of who he was, felt like something he had not known he was starving for. He closed his eyes. Outside, Seoul glittered and hummed 30 floors below them. Inside, two strangers breathed in the same quiet rhythm. And neither of them knew yet what that night was going to cost them, or what it was going to give them. Morning arrived the way mornings do in luxury hotels, gently, through automatic curtains that began their slow part at 7 a.m., letting pale gold light spill across the room in long, quiet stripes. The light reached Zarya first. She stirred, shifted, registered warmth, registered comfort. Registered the particular depressed feeling of having slept better than she had in months, and in that brief, beautiful, preconscious moment, she smiled. Then she registered the heartbeat under her cheek. Her eyes opened. She looked down at the arm that was not hers. She looked up at the jaw that was not a pillow. She looked sideways at the window and the Seoul skyline beyond it and thought, with extraordinary calm, "This is not my room." And then the calm shattered completely. She moved to sit up too fast, and the momentum took her straight off the edge of the mattress. She hit the floor with a sound that was less of a thud and more of a full-body announcement. The lamp on the nightstand rattled. Somewhere outside the suite, a door opened. A voice called through the penthouse entrance. Zarya scrambled to her feet. She was standing in the middle of a stranger's bedroom in her sleep shirt and bare feet, and the stranger was sitting up in bed watching her with an expression of complete composure that somehow made everything worse. He was, she registered in spite of herself, extraordinarily good-looking. Sharp features, dark eyes, the kind of effortless presence that made even a rumpled morning look intentional. He was watching her the way you watch something unfold when you're curious about how it ends. She started. "I didn't. The front desk gave me a card and I thought I would never." 3 security guards appeared in the bedroom doorway. One of them looked at Zarya, then at their employer, then back at Zarya with an expression that said everything about what they assumed and nothing about what was true. "Sir," the lead guard said carefully. "Should we remove her immediately?" And the man on the bed, the man whose chest she had spent the night sleeping on, turned his gaze from her to the guard and said, with absolute quiet authority, "Leave her alone." Guards left. The door clicked shut behind them with the soft, expensive sound of a room returning to silence. And then it was just Zarya, and the billionaire, and the Seoul skyline filling the windows behind him like a painting someone had commissioned specifically to make ordinary people feel small. Zarya pulled at the hem of her sleep shirt. It was not short, it hit mid-thigh, but standing barefoot in a stranger's penthouse bedroom made even a reasonable amount of fabric feel insufficient. "I'm so sorry," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I know how this looks. The front desk gave me a key card last night. There was some kind of system issue with my reservation. They said penthouse level and I assumed it was an upgrade and I was exhausted and I didn't think to question it and I genuinely did not know anyone was in here. She stopped, swallowed. Definitely did not know anyone was in here, she repeated because it felt important to say twice. The man looked at her for a moment. Then he reached over to the nightstand, picked up the phone and dialed 3 digits. This is Mr. Lee in the penthouse. I need someone from guest services up here immediately. There was a key card error last night. A pause. No police, just guest services. Another pause shorter. Now please. He set the phone down, looked back at her. Sit down, Zaria blinked. I'm okay standing. You look like you're about to pass out. I'm not. She stopped. Her legs were in fact slightly unsteady. She sat down on the edge of the armchair nearest to her, perching on it like a person ready to run. He stood from the bed. He was tall, she noticed, and moved with the particular unhurried ease of someone who had never once been rushed by anyone, and walked to the bar area in the adjoining room. She heard the sound of a coffee machine starting. He came back 2 minutes later with 2 cups and set one on the side table near her elbow without asking how she took it. She looked at it, then at him. Then she picked it up because whatever was in it smelled incredible and her brain needed reinforcements. He sat in the chair across from her, crossed one leg over the other and said, "What's your name, Zaria?" "Zaria Cole, Lee Hyun-woo." He said it simply, the way people say their names when they're not in the habit of needing to explain who they are. She hadn't recognized him last night. She hadn't recognized him this morning either, not until this moment, when the name landed in her brain and something shifted. Because she had walked through the lobby of this hotel yesterday and seen a framed article near the business concierge desk. Something about the summit, a profile on key attendees. And she had glanced at it briefly, too tired to read the full thing, but she remembered a photograph, sharp jaw, dark eyes, Lee Hyun-woo 33, chairman of HW Capital Group, net worth estimated at $4.8 billion. The coffee cup was halfway to her lips, it stopped there. She started, he said. "I slept on your..." "Yes." She set the coffee cup down very carefully. "I need you to know," she said with tremendous dignity, "that I have never done anything like this in my life." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was the architecture of one. "I didn't think you had. I'm a normal person. I'm here for the Entrepreneur Summit. I have a brand, sustainable fashion, Cole Plus Thread. I saved for 8 months to come to this conference and the hotel had a system error and I was half asleep and She stopped. Pressed her lips together. "I'm mortified. Respectfully, sir, I am going to be mortified regardless of what you say." This time the almost smile became slightly more definite. "Fair enough. Guest services arrived within 10 minutes. There were 2 apologies, 1 manager, and a confirmation that yes, a system migration the previous afternoon had caused a handful of room assignments to misfire. And yes, Ms. Cole's keycard had been incorrectly encoded to the penthouse suite. Instead of room 412, the manager was sweating. Hyun-woo watched him with the calm expression of a man deciding how much weight to apply to a situation. He applied very little. He accepted the apology with a nod, requested that Ms. Cole's stay be moved to an upgraded suite at no additional charge, and dismissed the manager with a look. The manager left with the energy of someone who had narrowly avoided something terrible and wasn't entirely sure how. Zaria collected her things, suitcase, laptop bag, the sleep shirt she had changed out of in the bathroom, her dignity, such as it remained, and stood at the penthouse door. She turned back. Hyun-woo was standing near the window now, coffee in hand, looking out at the city. He had the posture of a man who was used to watching things from above. "Thank you," Zaria said, "for not making it worse than it was. You didn't have to do that." He looked over his shoulder at her. "Get some rest before the summit." She nodded, started to turn, then stopped. "I ask you something." He turned fully to face her, waiting. "Last night, when the guards asked if they should remove me." She met his eyes. "Why did you say no?" He held her gaze for a moment. Something passed through his expression, brief and unreadable, like a word in a language she hadn't learned yet. "You looked like you needed to sleep," he said simply. Zaria studied him for another second. Then she nodded once slowly and left. She did not see the way he turned back to the window and stood there for a long time after the door closed. She did not see his expression then. She did not know what was going on in his head, and honestly, neither did he what happened next. Neither of them planned. At 10:15 that morning, a photo appeared on 3 different Korean entertainment news sites simultaneously. It had been taken by a hotel staff member, someone with a phone and poor judgment, and apparently an excellent sense of timing. It showed Zaria in the corridor outside the penthouse, her suitcase at her side, her sleep shirt still on from the night before, stepping out of Lee Hyun-woo's private suite at 7:43 in the morning. The caption on the first site read, "Mystery woman leaves HW Group chairman's penthouse after overnight stay." By noon, it had been picked up by 6 more outlets. By 2 in the afternoon, Zaria's name had been found. Someone had spotted her conference registration badge in a zoomed-in version of the image, and the internet had opinions. She found out when she came back to her new suite after the morning panels, set her laptop on the desk, and opened her email to find 47 new messages and a text from a number she didn't recognize that said simply, "Check Twitter." She checked Twitter. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. The hashtag was not kind. Half the comments called her calculating. The other half were more creative with their cruelty. Words like opportunist, clout chaser, and several things she refused to let land. Someone had already found her brand's Instagram page, and the comments there were a mixture of people defending her and people saying things that made her close the app before she finished reading. Her phone rang. Unknown number, she answered it. MS. Cole. The voice was cool, professional, and faintly accented. "My name is Jaisu. I'm the executive assistant to Mr. Lee Hyun-woo. He'd like to meet with you at your earliest convenience. This afternoon, if possible." Zaria stared at the wall. "Why?" A brief pause. "He prefers to explain in person." She met him in a private dining room on the 32nd floor. No staff, no guards inside the room. Just a table set for 2 near a window and Hyun-woo already seated, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbows, looking like a man who had spent the day in back-to-back meetings and was not particularly bothered by that. He gestured to the seat across from him. She sat. "Seen the coverage?" he said, not a question. "Yes, I want to be direct with you." He laced his fingers together on the table. "I have a situation. You now have a situation. I believe we can resolve both with one arrangement." Zaria looked at him steadily. "I'm listening. My family has been pressuring me toward an engagement, a merger arrangement with another company's board member's daughter. I have been resisting it for 2 years. The coverage this morning, while inconvenient, has created an opening." He paused. "If there is already a woman publicly connected to me, it complicates their timeline considerably." Room was very quiet. "You want me," Zaria said slowly, "to pretend to be your girlfriend for 6 weeks through the end of the quarter. I'll have my legal team draft a contract, appropriate compensation for your time, your image, any disruption to your business. You would attend 3 public events with me, conduct 1 or 2 interviews, that's all." Zaria sat back, looked at him carefully, thought about the Twitter comments. Thought about her brand's Instagram, already being used as collateral damage in a story she had never asked to be part of. Thought about the conference she had come here for, and how the morning panels had gone beautifully, how she had made 2 genuine connections before the news broke, and how by the afternoon session she had watched 3 people visibly recognize her name and whisper to the person beside them. "No," she said. Hyun-woo's expression didn't change. "No. I came here to build something real. I'm not going to build it on a lie." She stood up. "I appreciate the offer, genuinely, but I'll manage the coverage on my own." She left, and she meant it. She fully, completely meant it. Until she got back to her suite, checked her bank account out of anxious habit, and found a notification from her bank. The last of her emergency credit, the card she had used to book this trip, had been maxed out by a charge she did not make. In a city she was not in, Marcus. She sat on the bathroom floor with her back against the tub and her phone in her hand, and she did the math. The depleted joint account, the maxed card, the conference registration that had cost her more than she could afford. The flight home she still needed to pay to change because she had originally booked a later return. The number she arrived at made her close her eyes. She sat on that bathroom floor for 11 minutes, then she stood up, washed her face, looked at herself in the mirror for a long time, walked back to the room, picked up the hotel phone, asked to be connected to Mr. Lee's executive assistant. When Jaisu answered, Zaria said quietly, "Tell him I've reconsidered, but I want my own lawyer reviewing that contract." A pause, then, "Of course, Ms. Cole, he expected you might call back." Zaria's eyes narrowed slightly. "Did he? Did say to tell you," and I'm quoting directly, "the offer stands exactly as stated. Nothing more is being asked," she exhaled. "Tell him I'll be there at 9 tomorrow morning." What was going on in his head when she walked out that first time? Did he actually expect her to come back? Keep listening, because the next part will change everything you think you know about both of them. Contract was 12 pages long. Zaria's lawyer, a sharp Seoul-based attorney she found through the conference's legal referral network, went through every line with the focus of someone diffusing something. Hyun-woo's legal team sat across the table in expensive silence. Hyun-woo himself sat at the head of the table, reading something on his tablet, occasionally glancing up with the patience of a man who had learned long ago that the best negotiations happen when you don't appear to be negotiating. 2 hours later, Zaria signed. The compensation was more than she had made in the previous 18 months combined. Enough to clear every debt Marcus had left in her life. Enough to properly fund Coal and Thread through its next collection. Enough to make the 8 months of sacrifice feel, finally, like they had pointed somewhere worth going. She told herself this was purely transactional. She told herself that very firmly the first public appearance was a charity gala 4 days later. Jaisu sent a stylist. The stylist sent dresses. Zarya picked the one that felt most like herself, deep burgundy, structured shoulders, floor length, the kind of dress that didn't ask permission. She wore her hair out fully, crown and all, because nobody in that contract had said a single word about her hair, and she was not about to start adjusting things that didn't need adjusting. Hyeon-woo was waiting at the bottom of the hotel entrance steps when she came down. He looked at her for a moment. Not the way people sometimes looked at her at events like this, the quick scan, the categorizing, the subtle recalibration. He looked at her the way someone looks when they weren't expecting to be impressed and find themselves impressed anyway. You look, he said, like you're ready to walk into a room and own it. Zarya raised an eyebrow. Is that a compliment or a briefing? Both. He offered his arm. Shall we? She took it. And what was going on in his head at that moment? As the cameras outside the gala found them immediately, as the flashes began, as Zarya lifted her chin and walked beside him with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't announce itself but was impossible to ignore. What was going on in his head was something he would not have said out loud to anyone. Not yet. He was thinking that she fit beside him with an ease that surprised him. Not in a practiced way, not in a performed way. Just naturally, like two people who had somehow already learned each other's rhythm. He told himself it was because they'd had the unusual intimacy of that first accidental night. Proximity creates the illusion of familiarity. He knew that. He filed it there and moved on. The weeks that followed had a texture neither of them had anticipated. There were the public moments, the gala, a corporate luncheon, a waterfront press walk that generated photographs that ran in 4 different publications. In those moments they were professional, convincing. They had worked out a system. She would reach for his arm first whenever cameras appeared. He would lean slightly toward her when he spoke, creating the impression of private conversation in public space. It worked because it was specific. Specific things always look real, but there were also the private moments. The ones the contract hadn't accounted for, the car rides between events where neither of them felt the need to fill the silence. The late evenings when Jaisu would send through the next day's schedule and Hyeon-woo would be in the middle of something and Zarya would already be at the desk in their shared suite. A separate room arrangement they'd agreed to, though the suite was designed as one continuous living space. Working on her brand's next collection, fabric swatches spread across the coffee table. He would glance at the swatches sometimes. She caught him looking once. You can just ask, she said without looking up from her sketchbook. A pause. What's the concept? She looked up then. He was standing near the sofa, jacket off, looking genuinely curious in the way that people look when they've stopped performing and are just actually curious. She turned the sketchbook toward him. He sat down and looked at the pages for longer than she expected. She watched him take in the line drawings, the fabric notes, the small annotations she made to herself in the margins. He asked 2 questions, precise, intelligent questions about construction and sourcing, and when she answered them he nodded slowly and said, "This is serious work." "I know," she said simply. He handed the sketchbook back. Their fingers overlapped on the spine for exactly 1 second. Neither of them mentioned it. 3 weeks in, the thunderstorm came. Seoul in the rainy season was not quiet about it. The storm that rolled in on a Thursday night announced itself with the kind of thunder that vibrates in your chest. Rain hit the penthouse windows in sheets. The city below disappeared into grey. Zarya had fallen asleep on the sofa. She did that sometimes when she was deep in work and exhaustion took the decision away from her. She woke up sometime past midnight to find the suite mostly dark and the storm still raging. She heard him before she saw him, a sound from the other room. Not loud. The opposite of loud, the specific tense quiet of someone trying not to make a sound while something inside them was coming apart. She found Hyeon-woo sitting on the floor of the bedroom with his back against the bed frame, knees up, both hands pressed flat against the carpet. His breathing was wrong, too shallow, too fast, the kind of breathing that spirals if no one interrupts it. She crossed the room and sat down on the floor beside him without saying anything, not touching, just there. He didn't tell her to leave. After a long moment she said quietly, "You don't have to explain it." His jaw worked. Outside, thunder rolled. "It's been a long time since it's been this bad," he said finally. His voice was controlled but she could hear what it was costing him. "Okay," she said. "I don't." He stopped, pressed his lips together, started again. "I don't usually let people see this." "I know." She said it gently, not with pity. She was careful about that. With the kind of steady acknowledgement that says, "I see you and I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to perform being okay right now. I'm not a camera." Something in him shifted. She felt it more than saw it, the slight release of a tension he'd been holding in his whole body. She stayed on the floor beside him. She didn't offer solutions or analysis or the kind of brisk fix-it energy that she imagined most people in his life defaulted to. She just stayed. Occasionally she spoke, small things, easy things, the kind of words you use to give someone a rope back to the surface. She told him about the first time she'd ever presented her brand publicly. How her hands had shaken so badly she'd dropped her samples and had to collect them off the floor while 40 people watched. How she'd finished the presentation anyway. How shaking and continuing had turned out to be the same thing as brave. He listened. His breathing slowly, gradually, over the course of 40 minutes, found its way back to something normal. At some point, he leaned his head back against the bed frame and closed his eyes. At some point, she rested her head against the same bed frame and closed hers. When morning came, they were both asleep on the floor, shoulder to shoulder, the storm gone, the city outside quiet and washed clean. Neither of them said a word about it at breakfast, but something had changed. They both knew it. They simply had not yet decided what to do with the knowing. The exposure came on a Tuesday. Zarya was at a brand meeting, 2 boutique distributors she had finally connected with through the summit, a meeting that felt like the first genuinely good professional thing that had happened in months, when her phone began vibrating repeatedly in her bag. She ignored it through the meeting, checked it when she stepped into the corridor. 17 missed calls, 12 from a number she didn't recognize, 5 from the number she had saved as "Do Not Answer," which was Marcus. She opened the news alert. Exposed. HW Capital chairman's girlfriend signed paid contract for fake relationship. Documents leaked. The documents were real. Every page, her signature, the compensation figure, the clause about public appearances. All of it, laid out for the internet to form its opinions about. She knew immediately. There were only 2 people outside of lawyers who knew about the contract's existence. Who had she mentioned it to briefly, against her better judgment, in a moment of needing to talk to someone she trusted? Bianca. She had called Bianca 3 weeks ago. She had been lonely and conflicted, and she had made the mistake of reaching for something familiar. She had not given details, but she had said enough. And Bianca apparently had known someone willing to pay for the rest. Zarya stood in the corridor outside her meeting room and was very, very still for a long moment. Then she called Jaisu. "I know," Jaisu said before Zarya finished her first sentence. "Mr. Lee has seen it. He'd like to. I'll come to him." She walked into the suite to find Hyunwoo on the phone, speaking in rapid Korean, his back to the door. She set her bag down. She waited. He ended the call, turned around, and she saw it, the flicker of something in his expression that he controlled too quickly. Not anger, not at her, something more complicated than that. The look of a man whose carefully managed world had just become less manageable and who was trying to decide how he felt about the fact that it mattered to him. "I'm sorry," she said. "I told my cousin about the arrangement. I didn't tell her details, but I told her enough. I shouldn't have, that's on me." He looked at her for a long moment. "It's not your fault someone you trusted used it." "I know whose fault it is," she said quietly. "I've known for a while what Bianca is. I just kept making the mistake of hopping otherwise." Something crossed his face. Recognition. "I understand that," he said, and the way he said it, low and personal, like he was handing her something, told her it was not an empty response. His phone rang again. He glanced at it. His jaw tightened slightly. "Your family," she guessed. "My mother." He declined the call. "She has been vocal about the coverage. Bet. Wants me to release a statement clarifying that you are not a serious romantic interest." He set the phone face down on the table. "That you were a brief media strategy and nothing more." Zarya absorbed that, nodded slowly. "And what do you want to do?" He looked at her. And what was going on in his head at that moment, what he was seeing when he looked at her, was not the contract, was not the coverage, was not the complicated machinery of damage control. He was seeing her on the floor beside him at 2 in the morning talking about shaking hands and quiet courage. He was seeing burgundy fabric and sketchbooks, and the way she said "I know" when he told her his work was serious, not as a compliment, but as a statement of fact from someone who recognized the real thing. He was seeing the wrong room and the right feeling, and 12 weeks of slowly realizing that the most honest thing in his life had arrived by accident. "I want," he said carefully, "and what is currently strategic are not the same thing." "Then say what you actually want," she said, just once, without calculating the outcome first. A long silence. "I want to keep you in the room," he said. The suite was very quiet. Zarya looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up her bag. "I need some air," she said softly. "I'll be back." She walked to the door, stopped. Hyunwoo. She didn't turn around. "I heard you, I just need an hour." She left. He stood in the center of the suite and felt the specific, disorienting sensation of a man who has controlled everything for so long that the moment something slips beyond his management, he doesn't know what to do with his hands. He called Jaisu. Find out what flight she'd be on if she decided to leave tonight, he said. Jaisu paused. Sir, just find out. The press conference was supposed to be about the quarterly earnings report. It was not about the quarterly earnings report. Hyunwoo stood at the podium in front of 43 journalists and 3 camera crews and his mother in the third row with an expression that could have meant anything and said everything. He answered 2 earnings questions. Then he set down his prepared statement. I want to address the coverage from this week directly, he said. The room stilled. The contract that was leaked is real. It was a business arrangement that I proposed. The decision to enter it was mine. He paused. What the contract does not reflect, and cannot reflect, is what actually happened over the past several weeks. I am not going to stand here and reduce that to a media strategy. His mother's expression in the third row shifted. I am also not going to announce a family-arranged engagement to meet a timeline that was never mine to begin with. He looked up from the podium, directly at the cameras. I have spent a long time making decisions based on what made structural sense. I would like for once to make one that simply makes sense to me. He left the podium. His PR team stared after him. One journalist started talking immediately. 3 cameras pivoted to follow him as he walked off the stage and kept walking, straight through the side doors into the corridor where he pulled out his phone and called Jaisu. Flight departs in 2 hours and 40 minutes. She checked in online 20 minutes ago. He was already moving. He found her at the hotel entrance. Suitcase at her side, waiting for the car to the airport. She saw him coming. She didn't run. She didn't pretend she hadn't seen him. She stood and watched him cross the lobby toward her with the steady gaze of a woman who has decided she is done being surprised by her own feelings. He stopped in front of her. Both of them slightly out of breath, him from walking fast, her from something that had nothing to do with movement. You left the press conference, she said. Yes. Your earnings report can wait. She looked at him. He looked at her. Outside, a car horn, the city going about its business, indifferent and loud. Hyunwoo, she said quietly. Be careful, you don't owe me anything. The contract is done. You can walk back into that press conference and say whatever you need to say and I will understand it completely. I know you would, he said. That's not why I'm here. She waited. He exhaled, the specific exhale of a man who has been holding something for weeks and has finally decided the holding is more expensive than the release. The night you entered the wrong room, he said. I was 31 hours awake and completely alone in a way that I had talked myself into believing was normal. And then you were there, not performing anything, not wanting anything from me. Just, he paused, found the word. Present. Her eyes were bright. She didn't look away. I've not slept like that in years, he said. Before, since, except on a floor during a thunderstorm. A pause. I don't think that's coincidence, Zarya. She was quiet for a long moment, then she said, I called my cousin because I was lonely, because I'd been sitting with something I didn't understand and I needed to tell someone. She looked at him steadily. I told her I thought I was in trouble. She asked me what I meant. I said I didn't know yet. She tilted her head slightly. I think I know now. He stepped forward. She didn't step back. He pulled her into him, not dramatic, not performed. The way you hold someone when you are done pretending you don't want to, and her arms came around him and her cheek found his chest, and the rhythm was exactly what it had been at the beginning, steady. Calm, consistent, a heartbeat. The lobby didn't stop. The cameras outside still existed. His mother was probably calling. The quarterly report was waiting. Marcus was somewhere being terrible. Bianca was somewhere being Bianca. None of it touched them for that 1 minute later, weeks later. In the quiet of an early morning with Seoul doing its slow golden thing outside the window, Zarya would think about wrong rooms and right moments, and the particular mathematics of how disasters sometimes solve for things you didn't know you were missing. She would be at the desk with her sketchbook. He would be asleep on the bedroom side. And she would look up and think about how the best things in her life had arrived through the door she wasn't supposed to open. And she would smile, and go back to work. And later he would come out with 2 cups of coffee, and set one beside her elbow without asking and sit across from her, and read something, and neither of them would say a word for an hour. And it would be in every way that actually counts, exactly enough. Sometimes the biggest mistakes lead us exactly where we belong. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of Zarya's journey, please hit the like button, leave a comment telling us what part got you most, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Every comment, every share, every subscription tells us to keep going. Thank you for staying until the end.